weird, weird slate for the Big 12. I mean, on our pick'ems, neither of us did great. It really came down to one game that we'll get into. But the first game that I have on my slate, and I'll tell you what, Drew, so I didn't even know these two teams were playing. I did not give a single thought to this game because I didn't think I needed to. I thought very certain that TCU was going to take care of Houston. Houston hadn't scored a point in 8 quarters. They shut out in back-to-back games like they're Iowa playing a ranked football team. And TCU has had their problems, but they go on the road, beat up on Kansas last week, and I thought, okay, maybe they're riding the ship. Houston's a great get right game. Houston stinks. Houston's the worst team in the Big 12. I was wrong. I was so off base. Houston handles TCU 30-19 in Amon G. Carter Stadium. I mean, that is as bad as it gets.
I that one really was a jaw dropping result. Uh, it continues kind of our trend. We talked about it last week with TCU losing that national championship game a couple of years ago, and just maybe things aren't clicking anymore. We see it with Florida State right now too. They're 1-5 after getting demolished in their Big Six bowl game last year. This is genuinely stunning. And let's first, I want to give Houston a lot of credit. Houston couldn't score the football for so much this season. For them to go on a road in state, look, Houston and Dallas Fort Worth have a little bit of an in-state rivalry, clearly, just in various sports professionally, and I'll throw it down to the college scene too. This is a great win for the Houston Cougars. Just to go on the road, play quality defense. I'm not worried about that defense. They're playing good defense, but for their offense to find a way to score points, be opportunistic, trust the defense too. Great win for Houston. For TCU, this is just stunning. And I think after beating Kansas pretty handedly the week before, I thought, okay, I think TCU's cleaning it up a little bit. You and I felt very comfortable
Very good.
with that pick. Maybe Kansas is just that bad as we're kind of starting to get accustomed to more and more, because this was a shocking result, and one that in a weekend of stunners is going to go heavily under the radar because neither team is ranked. Uh, TCU is not getting the press they did a couple of years ago when they're on that undefeated run. But this is still a unbelievably disappointing result for Sonny Dykes and staff. And this was a get right year after last year. You had to give them a mulligan, say, all right, it happens. Like, you lose your Heisman quarterback. Just they're regrouping. They'll be much better this year. And for them to, let's say, stay neutral at best, wildly, wildly disappointing for the Horned Frogs.
Yeah, I think my first takeaway on the TCU side of this game is Sonny Dykes has used up. He's gone on a speed run on how quickly you could blow through goodwill of getting a team who's never been to a national championship game to a national championship game. And I mean, I've never seen a better year one for a head football coach than what Sonny Dykes did at TCU. All that goodwill is gone. All that goodwill is gone from here on out. Really, I don't see a real path for them this season. They got Utah a week from Saturday because they thank God they got a bye this week, and then they're hosting Texas Tech, who by the way is tied for first place in the Big 12. Watch out for the Red Raiders, just as we all predicted after week two. Then they go to Baylor. That's a toss up at best. Oklahoma State's they'll probably get right before then. Arizona's been a problem, and then Cincinnati's been much improved from a year ago. So I really, even after the SMU game, I felt like that there was an opportunity for Sonny Dykes to make it to another season to kind of get a reset on on the season. Okay, maybe you got the offensive coordinator right. I mean, Kendall Briles has been liked by nobody since he showed up at Fort Worth, and maybe you get an opportunity to right that ship. But then I thought, well, I mean, if this really goes off the rails, 3-4 wins on the season, you take another step back from a 5-win team a year ago, that might be enough to make a change. And they're in real scary territory if that happens. Because we talk at plethora about how important this season is and how important these next two seasons are as far as building momentum and trying to be the new bully in the Big 12. And TCU, I thought, was in a great spot for that. And then on the flippity flop, Houston's going to be a problem if Willie Fritz is getting his guys to come out after getting shut out in back-to-back games and go to
Mm-hmm.
Fort Worth
Yep.
and give TCU the business. Like they're still that locked in after such a rough slate, a rough season. I just imagine when he's able to start selling this program to these Houston kids and these Texas kids now can come into DFW and be like, hey, the Cougars own DFW now, and just seeing that go, they're going to be a problem. If the things that I'm seeing are continue and they keep building, Houston's going to be a problem.
Houston absolutely has the resources and talent to definitely develop something. We've seen it with their basketball program, how good they have been the last few years, and they put a lot of money into that. They found a great coach, and they've delivered. And you and I were very high on the Fritz hire, Brandon, when they made that decision. And, we knew they were going to go through some growing pains. But yeah, they've seen those growing pains at times, but they are getting better. I still look back at that Oklahoma loss. I watching that game. Yeah, offensively they were abysmal, but I thought that team is fighting. They did not quit that game, and I was impressed by that. Even the Iowa State game, offensively they just couldn't get it going. But I thought those kids did. I mean, that defense fought their tails off. I was impressed. I really was, and they're rewarded with a really nice road victory. They are building something I think that can be very unique. And again, we've hammered this point so many times, but there's plenty of opportunity in the coming years with no traditional power in the Big 12 currently to make run. Houston has that chance. Now they're a long ways from seeing that. They've got a lot to clean up on the offensive side, but very encouraging. And for TCU, look, Gary Patterson, you know, kind of left a few years ago, gave that program a huge shot in the arm. And Coach Dykes, incredible what he did year one, but a lot of those were Gary Patterson's guys. They mixed up a few formulas, Brandon, and it worked out. I mean, that's a quarterback that, you know, was a Patterson guy and, wins the Heisman with Duggan. And now, Dykes guys are coming in here, and I don't know if they're producing at a Big 12 level, and that's a problem. That's a problem, and the execution just hasn't been there. It's shocking. This one, you and I think that was our highest confidence level of the week, if I remember correctly. I felt great about that game, and shows in this league though, Brandon, 0 weeks off this year. Then that should be a message to every single locker room. You don't take a week off in the Big 12, because if you do, home or away, you'll get smacked.
I think you're absolutely right. Another game that we were both very wrong about, and certainly like if you told me that this game was going to go the way that it did at the beginning of the year, I would have thought you were crazy. And that's Oklahoma State and West Virginia. I mean, from the get-go, West Virginia blew the brakes off of Oklahoma State. I know coming into the season, I had questions about Oklahoma State on like the high ends with Alan Bowman. I mean, we're in such a conference with Cam Rising and Jalen Daniels and Garrett Green, like elite quarterback play, or so I thought at the time. And then, yeah, you bring in Alan Bowman to that fight. But then even with that, I'm like, okay, well, Gundy's always got a well-coached football team, gonna have a good defense. Ollie Gordon's a problem. They're gonna be able to work around Bowman. They can't. They can't do that. This team, they bring back a lot of starters from last year. I thought that was a big plus for them. Turns out their starters just stink, and it doesn't matter if you bring back talent if the talent isn't any good.
Yeah, you did right, Brandon. I think, well, for Oklahoma State, almost a reverse of kind of last year where they started pretty poorly, but have kind of gotten stronger as the season went on before they kind of took that dip at the end. What is this, lost 3 now for Oklahoma State on the season?
Yeah, 3 in a
And
row.
frankly, they should have lost. They could have easily lost to Arkansas too. Arkansas just blew that game, to be very. And that would look like, and frankly, that's going to look like a pretty good win potentially by the end of the season. That Arkansas team isn't bad, coming from a very biased, you know, commentator, but they're not a bad team. That's a good win for Oklahoma State. But, they had a chance at home against Utah. Utah was not at full health. They couldn't get it done, Brandon. K-State, I'm not shocked they lost to K-State on the road, but I think the way they lost was rather disappointing.
Yeah.
And then for West Virginia to come in, and it's not a bad West Virginia team, I will still say that. And they're gonna be very difficult for Iowa State coming up this week, which we'll get to a little later. But it's still just shocking. And for Coach Gundy, I mean, Coach Gundy earns his salary. He's earned it. He's a great coach. He's done so much great good for the people of Stillwater and beyond. But yeah, this is just another one that makes me just shake my head over and over. And for West Virginia, they're finding a way, Brandon. It seems like they're cleaning things up after a rather difficult. They had two very tough losses to lose to Pitt. It was difficult, and Penn State was a tough week one loss, tough game in general. But they've cleaned it up. They found a way to get it done over Kansas. Wasn't pretty, but they got it done. And then they beat Oklahoma State, and now they're feeling some juice, and they absolutely could be a real pain for teams coming up in the Big 12.
What a world. I mean, I this is, I think, going to be our 60th episode of the Big 12 podcast. I've been a Big 12 fan forever, and I have never had less of a grip on what's happening in this conference than I think I do right now. I mean, what are we talking about? Houston blows out TCU. Oklahoma State gets blown out at home, by the way. I think Stillwater's the best environment in the Big 12 now, and for West Virginia to come in and just that game, just like the Kansas State game, never felt like it was going to be competitive for one moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I don't know what to say at this point, Brandon. And we talked about in July and August how chaotic this conference slate had a chance to be. We're
We're
getting
seeing
that,
it.
and
We're
maybe
getting it.
even more, because you and I felt pretty good on Oklahoma State. We felt they were a Big 12. We thought they'd be in Dallas. We really
Yeah,
did.
Big
We thought
12
they were a
contender.
heavy contender. Top three was on both of our lists. I believe them,
Yeah.
K State, and Utah. Those were definitely my top three, and they just haven't been able to get it done. And I'm not worried about any job security with Coach Gundy.
No.
Not going there, but it's just they can't help but feel disappointed because on paper, coming into this year, I thought they're the ones I think that are going to take advantage the most of OU and Texas leaving is Oklahoma State. I felt they had a real opportunity, and still a lot of time to go, and not that they can't clean some things up and still finish the season strong, but G. Litney, they've got to be frustrated in Stillwater right now.
Baylor and Iowa State. This game kind of oddly enough, I just talked about how I have no grip on this conference. This game went kind of how I had hoped it would have gone. A little bit of a slow start for Iowa State. It took some time to feel out Baylor. Would have liked them to go to a better start, especially in what looked to be an absolute S tier environment. Actually, I just talked about Stillwater being the best environments in the Big 12. Ames might give them a run for their money, believe it or not. I mean, that was an electric environment. I know when I talked to Iowa State fans, they were worried about how the participation level in the whiteout, the uniforms
Yeah.
are awesome, and the uniform. I also got to give credit to the uniform reveal because the whole week they have the standard black and white Iowa State
Mm-hmm.
logo on their helmet, and then like 2 days before, they're like, psych. They bring out the script helmets. It looked very clean, very unique. The whiteout was incredible,
Mm-hmm.
and the Cyclones took care of business. Like I said, a slow start nonetheless, but they took it to them. And by by the fourth quarter, I was like, okay, this is the game that I thought it would be.
It played out. It was a slow start, but boy, it was pretty to watch them just come back. The crowd, you're dead right, Brandon, was great. It shows the Big 12 can have some, and they do. There's so many great stadiums in the Big 12. They're not 100,000 seaters like you see in other conferences, but some great stadiums that get loud. And I'm with you. I was with all those other Iowa State fans. I thought for sure we're going to have some red in there. We'll have some some gold. Just part of life. I didn't think that, but student section was incredible. It was white across the stadium. It looked great. And Iowa State played a clean game. Best offensive football game of the season. Rocco Becht, outside of one bad interception late first half, I thought played a really clean game. The defense got out to a slow start, but unsurprisingly made their adjustments and played a really good football game and took care of business against a Baylor team that I still don't think is that bad talent wise. I don't think that's the issue in Waco, but another loss, and they're starting to add up, unfortunately, for Coach Aranda and his staff. I actually love Dave Aranda. I think he seems like a solid dude. At the time, good hire, LSU defensive coordinator. They had great success first couple of years he was there. But they're not getting it done right now. But they're still a talented team. I still think they'll give teams trouble. Robertson's not a bad quarterback. They have weapons. They do have some size up front. But for Iowa State, pretty amazing, Brandon. I don't know what else to say. When I saw the schedule in the preseason, I thought, man, it could be interesting if they can get out hot. And that Iowa game was the one that was key for me. I thought they could find a way to win in Iowa City. I felt it could be a springboard for them playing some good football September into October, and it's great right now. 5-0, it's incredible. They can become bowl eligible as early as Saturday, but obviously a scary situation looms out east in Morgantown.
Yeah, first time they're 5-0 since 1980. So 17 years before I was born. What a time to be alive. The newspaper in Central Iowa, who I don't want to give any positive credit to whatsoever, put together an article. Star Trek was dominating the box office. MASH was a top TV hit. Frizzy hair, punk
Mm.
rock was the style last time. Iowa State was 5-0. Boy, it feels good. I mean, what a time to be an Iowa State fan, because the basketball preseason rankings are going to come out soon. They're going to be top
Mm-hmm.
five, but by then if they take care of business against West Virginia, they'll be top 10 in football. Women's basketball is going to be ranked. They'll almost certainly be the highest ranked women's basketball team in the state of Iowa. Just want to throw that out there. Um,
Yep,
and
yep.
then, yeah, speaking of that team out east, they're going to be ranked in none of those things. None of those things. 0 for 3.
Mm. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting statistic, Brandon. I'm happy you
Just want to throw that
decide
out
to
there.
enlighten me on that. I definitely need to hear about that. I want to give a quick shout out to Matt Campbell, too. Look, um,
Unbelievable.
what he's done, and it's been talked about a lot during his tenure at Iowa State, what he's been able to accomplish, but it is still just kind of mind numbing to me that Iowa State has consistently, traditionally been competitive under his tenure. Losing season his very first season. That's to be expected when you're trying to take over a program and rebuild. 2022 wasn't a pretty year, but they kind of had kind of a bizarre year just after losing Brock Purdy and Brees Hall, and that was just a transition year. What he's done though, and just building consistent teams, players that play for him, and former players as well, they all just seem love playing for the guy. And all-time winningest coach at Iowa State history, and it's a history that is not pretty when it comes to gridiron. It's a tough place to win historically, but they have built so much positive momentum under his tenure, and he has been just incredible. I'll never, not that I won't get mad at Matt Campbell now and then, that's guaranteed. That's a natural football fan, but what he's done for just the city of Ames, Iowa State University, state of Iowa, it can't be undersold because I'm not kidding, Brandon. Iowa State, most of my fandom, it's not pretty in the world of football. I'm pretty used to 2-10, 3-9. If they went like 5-7, I was like, that wasn't bad. We got like one big upset. I was like, that's a good season. That was fun.
Yeah,
Um,
you're playing for a bowl game in November.
yeah, that was like, oh, this isn't bad. If we can just find one big upset, and
Yeah.
they usually did under Paul Rhodes. I mean, they pulled off some wild upset every year. Um, but what Campbell's done is just incredible. And I think to see Jack Trice, a stadium that historically is tough to sell out, they didn't sell out a lot. Historically, to see it just consistently sold out, Brandon, and see 61,500 people there every Saturday is absolutely incredible. It really is. So that can't be under. They had never sold out, I think, a 61,000 seat Jack Trice Stadium game until 2021 in November. So it's just traditionally it's tough to sell for Iowa State, but they found a way. They built the fan base in the state, and I could go on all night, but again, what he's done is incredible.
The one out of conference game of the week, UCF and Florida. Um, this one hurt my heart. This one hurt. I was hoping Arthur Gustavo Malzahn the third would get the guys ready. I would have loved nothing more than the Knights to go into the swamp and beat down on a team from the Sucks Eggs Conference. But nonetheless, Florida pulled it out. Tough spot to be. KJ Jefferson, I forgot that what KJ Jefferson is like as a quarterback. And that's on me. I saw him play at Arkansas. I enjoyed watching him play at Arkansas, but he's still Arkansas KJ. I thought, I don't know, maybe Gustavo Malzahn could get him right. Not quite. You can take the KJ out of Arkansas, but you can't take the KJ out of KJ or something.
Well, first I'll defend KJ because 2021 KJ at Arkansas was a fun time for Pitmaster and company. Brandon, the KJ to Traylon Burks connection was a special one in 2021.
That's right.
So I think coaches are still like kind of looking for that, but yeah, the last couple of years it has not been. It's fun for KJ, and I feel bad because I really thought they could do it. I thought the way Florida's been playing, just the negative energy around that program. I just love the storyline too much of UCF going in there and winning. And Florida did what, frankly, Florida's supposed to do, considering the history and tradition of that program. They did win. There's no shame in UCF losing this game, but it's still, I think, disappointing because it just felt like if there was a chance to really just make a statement and just take it to a team that I'm not saying is an in-state rival, but I'm not saying they like each other. This was the game, and they just couldn't get it done. So offensively, you're right, though. They just were non-existent. Their defense, I thought, gave them a shot.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that offense could put up 30 on Florida, but I was wrong. So I mean, it is what it is.
A tough spot. I guess they didn't play this week, so I would be remiss in not bring up Colorado. It does make me feel better because like maybe UCF just stinks. Maybe that Colorado UCF win doesn't have as much weight as we thought it did last week. Because maybe UCF isn't all that good.
Maybe but that's the Big 12 right now, and that's just college football as a whole right now.
Yeah.
Is we can't figure it out right now, Brandon. It's such chaos. Somebody compared this season to that famous 2007 college football season where it was just upset after upset and no one could figure out like what the heck was going on all season. We're not to that level yet. We still got a lot of work to do, but
I think if
I gotta
Oklahoma
say,
topples Texas, I think we're on track to give it a run for its money. It can't be as good because the BCS at the time, you can only pick two teams, so it can't live up to that. But yeah, if Oklahoma upends Texas, that would be the third number one team in a row to, or was Georgia number one? No, they had gotten bumped to number two, right after
yeah, but they
what's
were
his
one
name?
at one
Brock
point.
Vandegrift.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's right.
Great
So a
moment.
top two
Or
team
maybe
losing three
Kentucky
weeks in a
football is
row.
just tough. Maybe we didn't think about that. Maybe Kentucky's football is just tough. Unless they
Well,
play South Carolina.
unless they play South Carolina. Okay, well, hear me out, Drew Russell. So Oklahoma upends Texas, which wouldn't be crazy. Oklahoma kind of has their number. Michael Hawkins Jr. I love me some Michael Hawkins Jr. He's awesome. Uh, Maybe he lights it up in the Cotton Bowl. And then no matter what happens with Ohio State and Oregon, that's going to be a top three loss, one way or the other. So now we get 3 weeks in a row with the top two team losing, and then a week with two of the top three teams losing. If that happens, 2007 is gonna get a run for its money. As much as a 12-team playoff could do that.
Yeah, I I agree with that, Brandon. I'm just curious. I mean, again, like from the playoff bracket situation, where in the past, if it was one loss or two losses, you're kind of done, or just like two losses, you were done traditionally in the past for college football playoff. One loss, depending on your conference. But now, I mean, who knows? There's going to be some really heavy debate. Those top 15 teams, holy cow, come late November, early December when you're having jockeying for the large bids. I can't lie, Brandon. I can't wait for that because there's going to be so many teams that are going to have some like terrible looking losses on their resume, but then they're going to. I mean, it's going to be like the NCAA basketball tournament, like when they're trying to make those decisions of who got left out, and everybody gets
And then you
mad.
get
But
bid
like,
stealers in the
well,
conference championship games.
right. But the difference is like most of those teams that don't make the tournament usually aren't good enough to win it all. They just want to be there. Look, college football, like some of those teams that might be left out actually are good enough to make a semifinal, or if they get the right run up, like bracket a final.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting just how that all plays out, like because teams are dropping like flies. Georgia losing to Alabama is no shame. Thought Alabama, all right, they're going to be they're old school Alabama, and then to go lose to Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt goes on the walk of a lifetime with the goalpost down through Nashville, which is one of the top moments in college football memory for me. I thought that was just hysterical watching that student section take that field goal post down Broadway in Nashville. But we don't know, Brandon, and we're going to continue not to know.
Well, and I'd just like to point out, and I'm glad you brought up the goal post ended up in the river, because Tennessee did that a couple years ago. But Tennessee, that river's right outside the stadium. Like you take it out across the parking lot, there's a body of water there. Those Vandy folks had to travel 3 miles, and I mean down Broadway. That's a special spot. I just imagine being on one of those bachelorette party weekends. They're in Nashville, and all of a sudden they see 300 psychos carrying a large yellow pole with the police escort. So that's cool. I love that. That was the best moment ever. Um, and I think also something to keep in mind. I know you're a big, economy guy, big fiscal guy, like to track investments and whatnot. Watch out for the
Mm,
winflation effect with all these SEC teams losing because we're not done. Georgia still has to play Texas, still has to play Tennessee, still has to play Ole Miss. A three-loss Georgia team
good
isn't
point.
out of the realm of possibilities. Texas A&M might have some upset juice, especially with the Longhorns on the schedule this year. I mean, there's a there's a chance. Are we out of undefeated SEC teams already?
Outside of Texas,
Outside of Texas, and then we just threw out the scenario where Oklahoma can upend them. Yeah, we're out of
everybody else
undefeated
I think has a
SEC
loss.
teams. So I
Yeah,
mean,
everybody else has a loss. Texas A&M is undefeated in SEC play, but they do have the loss to Notre Dame. So, but that's
so watch
everybody
out for
else has
that,
a loss.
inflation.
Yeah.
Because now we're looking like, say, Kansas State makes a run, and then Iowa State loses one game. I guess it would have to be to Kansas State if they remain a one-loss team. I mean, that might help out the Big 12 if they have a one-loss Big 12 team or a three-loss SEC team. I feel like unfortunately the gap has to be there for some of those SEC teams, like I think
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee, Ole Miss. But
Has
watch
to
out,
be.
just
Again,
economics
saying that
of
that'll be how do
wins.
the win? I love that term, winflation. As you and I, big business guys, 9 to 5
Do
guys, we
business,
love business, stock market.
the
We're
deals,
both really into that.
taking cars to
Big deals
places.
and cars and places. Yeah, you and I are just on the same wavelength right now, Brandon. Um, no, but what do those? How tough are those losses? Like, for Tennessee to lose to Arkansas, I mean, Arkansas did lose to Oklahoma State. So where does that? Will that matter? Probably not. But like, there is a Big 12 team that just did defeat a team that beat the number 5 team in the country or top 5 team in the country. So who knows? I think it's going to stay unpredictable. And again, in an era where schools can pay for top talent if they want to, I think we're going to continue to this might be a situation where everybody said, oh, it's going to be top heavy. And it is. Yeah. Like when Vanderbilt beats an Alabama team that's getting heavy funding, that's just hilarious. Like, how do you not enjoy that? Like, these upsets might be even more crazy now, just considering how much funding some of those schools are getting. So keep bringing it. I'm not complaining. This is incredible content. You and I are living our dream right now, Brandon.
You're absolutely right. Um, Next game on the slate, Kansas and Arizona State. Got to give my guy Sam Levitt a shout out. Also, a quick shout out for me. 9-1 in my last 10 bookie broke bets, so I'm on fire. Let's see, I'm up $2,700 on the year. So that means if you were riding with me since the beginning of last season, you'd only be down like $1,700 right now. So we're working our way back to the green. That just shows how bad last year was. I was on this kick where every single week I was betting on plus 2,600 parlay for every SEC team to kick one field goal. And I thought it's going to hit one time. It never came
I
close.
remember that.
It was hardly I was hardly ever like alive after the noon games. Like it was like 25% of the time like I would make it to the 2:30 kickoffs. But then my hopes would die. So it was a bad year. We're on top this year and Arizona State was a big part of that. Um Upending Kansas or hanging on against Kansas. Kansas gave them a real good run for their money. But I mean the Sun Devils, they're back.
I just want to say first off, I really do miss getting text when we both were in Iowa, Brandon, on a Saturday morning. You and I both usually just called a football game the night before, and you send me your bet of it's the Rude Russell special,
The Russell
and
special. I would have
it's
hit
gonna
this
it's
week, by
gonna
the way.
hit. Would have hit.
I think that's
Yeah,
like
you'd had
back to
some
back weeks
success.
now, huh?
Yeah,
Watch
yeah.
out.
You'd always put a quick little Andrew Jackson on it, and it always meant a lot to me that you would put the Rude Russell special on a regular basis, and Iowa State Arkansas meant a lot, but no, for Arizona State, again, I think I run the same narrative with them nearly every single week because it's just true. They had pretty limited expectations coming into the season. They had a home game against a team that I know has a bad record right now. And I know in the intro didn't have the nicest things to say. But you know what? They did win. They
They did win.
defended their home turf and got a win. And considering they were the ones who were expected to be cellar dwellers or let's say bottom three, bottom four this season, these are good, productive wins for Arizona State. So if you're a Sun Devils fan, yeah, they lost to Texas Tech on the road. Not a big deal. Texas Tech's playing great ball right now, which we'll get to in a minute. But for the Sun Devils, just keep on churning. And man, for Kansas, you kind of run out of words. Like they're back in the place where usually we're just used to, which is dead last in the conference. That's exactly where they're sitting right now. But I think it's just the way that this is broken down and considering they were a top 25 program last year. They were top 25 in the preseason. Their fans had a right to chirp throughout the preseason. They should have been proud. They should have had expectations for this team. They kept Lance Leipold from leaving. Um, and it's just turned into what has been an unmitigated, I'm not going to use the term disaster because there's still season to go, but it has been a very rough patch to begin. If they lose a couple more games, Brandon, or if they make a bowl now, if they just make a bowl. If they go
Oh,
6-6.
that'd be
That's a huge
great.
win. I don't see it, but I'm just saying, like, if they can find a way just to be competitive at the end of the season, they can save it. But if they don't, it has been a disaster.
Yeah, and I guess if I'm going to defend Kansas here, like let's obviously 1-5, not a great place to be. I'd also like to mention it's a tough thing to start off the season with six straight games, no buys. I think they finally have one coming up this week, but that's a month and a half nonstop of playing competitive football. That's a tough place to be. Um, and like looking at their losses, it, one score loss against Illinois. Illinois is a top 25 team, and they're going to stay in the top 25 the rest of the season probably. UNLV turns out to be a Mountain West contender, one of the best Group of Five teams in the country, a playoff contender if they don't get upended by former Ohio State legend Kyle McCord. One score
Mm.
loss, a 4 point loss on the road in Morgantown. The TCU loss is bad. I mean, I can't quite defend that. And then another one score loss against Arizona State. Kelly Ford, I think, does these what if rankings, and it's basically what if the opposite result happens in a one score game because those games are basically coin flips. I love this stat. These numbers as a Nebraska fan, we end up very favorably in all of these what if rankings. Kansas, yeah, they'd be 5-1 if they just had opposite results in one score games, so that they're not that far off. They're not. They're going to be probably the best 1-5 team in the country right now, which doesn't count for a whole lot.
Yeah,
Trust me, as a fan of a team who is the best 3-9 team of all time, doesn't have a lot of weight to it. You don't want to be that team for sure. But yeah, a
that
bowl
was a
game would be
special run though,
amazing.
Brandon. That was special. That was a
That
special
was
time.
special, unfortunately. They got Houston this week. That's a must win. And then they got a tough slate: Kansas State, Iowa State, BYU, and then Colorado and Baylor to wrap off the season. So I mean, you got to go 2-1 in that stretch against three ranked teams. Uh, that's a tough place to be,
It'll be tough.
especially
It'll be tough.
playing
That's
that's a
we'll go with.
especially playing that road game in Kansas City against Iowa State. That'll be tough going on the road like that, playing in
You're
front of
not.
that
Oh,
Iowa State
Iowa
environment.
State's selling gear. They're selling like stuff in their like team store, like Kansas City Cyclones, like what? Somebody like renamed Arrowhead to like something Iowa State related. I'm thinking
That's so funny.
there's going to be more cardinal and gold there, I think, than blue and red if things keep playing the way they do. And Iowa State fans in Kansas City, it is a marriage in heaven for those two. Kansas City loves Iowa State. They help supply the economy through March. I can confirm that. The only reason Power and Light makes it through March is just because Iowa State fans just
That's
show up
right.
and drink all their alcohol. No problem every single March. It's like clockwork. Kansas City's nirvana to Iowa State fans. So yeah, you're dead right. It's going to be chaos.
Last game of this slate, and this feels like the pinnacle Big 12 after dark game that we were hoping for coming into the season. Arizona and Texas Tech. We talked about it earlier in the show. I have no read on the Big 12. Texas Tech is that personified. We were coming into the season. We're buying in on the Joey McGuire hype, and we're all in. They have a weird first 2 weeks where they just look awful, and then we're like, all right, maybe Joey McGuire isn't that guy. And they blow out UNT, and then they win all their games afterwards, and they have a couple of good wins along the way. I mean, that Arizona team is a tough out on
Yeah,
the road and it's kind of I love this as a rivalry, by the way. This West Texas versus Arizona
yeah,
team. Big win against Cincinnati. Uh, let's see here, win against Arizona State, who we just gave plenty of flowers to. Outstanding, outstanding bounce back stuff from Texas Tech. It feels kind of like they do. They got Baylor and TCU up next, so they could really be looking at a 7-1 record. As
yeah,
silly as that sounded, after they got blown out by Washington State in week 2, after surviving Abilene Christian in week 1.
yeah. No, I mean just keep the wheels turning. Yeah, and you're right, Brandon. They lost to Washington State by 21, and it was not a pretty loss. They weren't competitive. Uh, they looked like they didn't want to be there, and I had serious doubts this team was bought in for the season. But whatever message they've been selling at practice, the players have bought in, and they have played some rather inspired quality football this last month, and they've earned the record that they have gotten to. You're right, very favorable next two games against in-state teams, which is never fun because you're usually going to get a decent shot, but that remains to be seen because both have losing records right now. But they could play themselves really nice into November, and we've been high on Tech. It feels like every preseason. And that Wyoming game last year, week one, still is burned in my brain of what just happened. But they have done some phenomenal stuff. They've got a good offense. They've got quality players. Boyd continues to just be a workhorse at the tailback position. And in a conference that has Ollie Gordon, and I'm not blaming Ollie Gordon. I think he's had some circumstances that have been tough for him. But Taj Boyd's been the best tailback in the Big 12 this season. I'll say that. And if he keeps turning, Brandon, they keep limiting those turnovers, and the defense just makes enough plays, they might have double-figure wins by the end of the season. I wouldn't be shocked whatsoever.
Weird, 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 weird. How funny would that be? A BYU Iowa State or a BYU Texas Tech? Big 12 championship game. How funny would that be? I'd love it.
It'd feel right, honestly, for the way that this conference has shaped up to be, doesn't it? Though, like
Yeah.
BYU, Iowa State, or Tech BYU, just random. Like it really is. This conference is so freaking random right now. Yeah, that game wouldn't even phase me. That's how like dialed in I am these days. That's like seriously, that's how dialed in I am.